Chrystia Freeland is former Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Secretary of Canada, and recently became an unpaid economic advisor to the Ukrainian president. She was there for the Trump-Zelenskiy meeting. So, Chrystia, you spent the week in Davos, in part as an unpaid economic advisor to President Zelenskiy of Ukraine. He had a meeting on Thursday with President Trump. Did you get a readout on that meeting and how it was perceived?
So I'm not speaking for Ukraine, David, but let's say as a friendly observer, what I am hearing, and I think what everyone else is hearing, from the Ukrainians, from the Americans, and indeed from the Europeans, is that at this point, the Ukrainians, the Americans, and the Europeans are all pretty much on the same page when it comes to this negotiation. And that's actually a remarkable outcome when you think about how rocky the path has been to get here. So, you know, it feels like there is quite a lot of optimism from Ukrainians, from Americans, from Europeans. And I really think the bottom line is that the ball is in Putin's court.
You have been focused for some time on what comes after the war in the economic rebuilding of Ukraine, and you're advising President Zelenskiy now on that subject. At what point do we make that pivot?
I think we need to start making that pivot now. And, you know, I really think, David, you know, for the past 4 years of war, we have been, quite rightly, I think, focused on Ukraine as the virtuous victim. But I think this is going to be the year when we pivot to seeing the Ukrainians quite differently. And when we start seeing them as a really strong ally, as Europe's military shield, as Europe's arsenal, the country that knows how to build, knows how to wage modern war, and knows how to build the weapons for modern war. And in addition to all of that, as a huge economic opportunity. The opportunity has started now. There are a lot of companies in Ukraine investing particularly in defense technology. One investor described defense tech as Ukraine's oil. So the investor said, you know, what oil has been to the Gulf states, defense technology is going to be to Ukraine. It is now, and when the war ends, that will be even more the case. And I think that's absolutely true.
What level and type of investments required? First, to have Ukraine play that role in the defense area, but then presumably to go beyond that in its economy, to have a more diversified economy beyond high-tech warfare.
It's going to take a lot of money. I think the good news is we've seen what happens when countries in the Warsaw Pact, in the former Soviet Union, reformed their economies and joined the European Union. You know, in 1990, when the Warsaw Pact collapsed, when the Soviet Union collapsed, Poland and Ukraine had roughly the same per capita GDP. Today, Poland's per capita GDP is 5 times the per capita GDP of Ukraine. In 2004, you had countries of Eastern Europe and the former Soviet Union join the EU, and those countries saw their GDP triple. One of the most important things about the economic opportunity for Ukraine is that Ukraine is now on a clear path to EU membership.
When you say it's going to take a lot of money, how much of that will come from private investment as opposed to governments such as the United States and various European governments? How much is public? How much of it will be private, do you think?
There is a lot to rebuild. And there is a very significant commitment already from the European Union to support Ukraine. The World Bank has been doing a lot. Ukraine right now is negotiating an IMF program of support as well. And it is going to take some public money, some public support from Ukraine's allies around the world. And, you know, I think it's very impressive the degree to which the EU is there. But what I think people get that. I think people understand that Ukraine is going to need the support to rebuild. The opportunity that I don't think people are fully focusing on right now is there's going to be a tremendous economic opportunity. And we've seen this story before. Some of the great investment opportunities in the world happened in Poland, in Eastern Europe, when you had the collapse of communism and the building of a market economy, and then joining the EU. And you're going to see a version of that happening with Ukraine. Some of the investment can start now. What I'm hearing from a lot of investors is the big investments are going to come when the war ends, and that security is a precondition for major investment. And I think that makes sense. But I think the smart players are starting to look at Ukraine and see this is going to be a place where you can really make some very significant investments, earn some really, really significant returns. Defense tech, I think, is going to be a really, really hot sector in Ukraine, and the smartest players are already there. But I think you're going to see people looking also at agriculture and agri-food. I think you're going to see people looking at forestry. I think you're going to see people looking at technology more generally. Ukraine is a very high-tech society. It's part of the reason that they've been able to do so well in the drone wars. And so I think you're going to see investments in technology more generally, including some technologies going from military use into civilian use, including with AI. And then I think you're going to see a really big privatization program. Ukraine has 3,000 state-owned enterprises. It has a plan to privatize them. So, I think this is going to be a version of the emergence of market economies in Eastern Europe in the 1990s, at the beginning of this century. And that is going to be a huge opportunity for investors, and also really great for the people of Ukraine.
We began your week in Davos, focused really on Greenland and what President Trump was saying about Greenland and dealing with the Europeans. That seemed to have shifted on Wednesday when President Trump said that they had a framework for an agreement of some sort. What is the Allied reaction? You talk to all of the allies, the European countries. What is the reaction to the drama we saw over Greenland this week?
It was a very volatile week. And I think there were a lot of experts here and across Europe who suddenly became experts in Greenland. There were a lot of ups and downs. I would judge the mood of the Europeans to be, right now, a feeling of relief and that a bullet has been dodged. And I think people are very happy that an off-ramp seems to have been found. But I do think the whole episode has been just the latest wake-up call for Europe. And I think, what the Europeans are feeling more and more is that they have to become united, that they have to strengthen their ability to militarily defend themselves, that they have to strengthen their economies to do that. I would say the most popular writer and philosopher this week in Davos has been the Greek general who wrote about the history of the Peloponnesian Wars. The Athenians said, look, we're stronger than you. We're going to do whatever we want to you. The strong do what they will, and the weak suffer what they must. This is the line everyone is repeating. And Ukraine actually fits in here, because I think the Europeans are now seeing Ukraine not just as needing to be defended because the rule of law needs to be defended, not just needing to be defended because Ukraine is on Europe's border, but the Europeans are really starting to see Ukraine as a very important strategic ally. I've heard a lot of people saying, Ukraine actually has the strongest army in Europe. Ukraine has held off the Russians for 4 years. We need the Ukrainians right now as much as they need us.